What's going on, everybody? This is Island Hopper TV Podcast. Today we're going to compare the United States and China and let you guys know what the big differences are. I've been here for 45 days in China. Let's do it. First up, let's talk about the big one, the tech firewall versus the American social media platforms. So here in China, they have alternatives to Google. They have alternatives to Facebook, Instagram, like WeChat. They have alternatives to Amazon or Uber, like Didi or Meituan. So they have a lot of different apps. None of them are the same. So the United States has Facebook, Google, all of that. China has WeChat, Meituan, Alipay, all these different apps. None of them are the same. So there's a firewall, and this is a big difference that you'll feel as a foreigner or someone living in China right off the bat. And for a lot of people, the only way to actually access any of those websites is if they have a SIM card from the outside that's already turned on. In my case, I use AT&T, and I have international roaming no matter where I go. I just pay $185 a month or something like that. Verizon also offers a mobile passport kind of thing. And because of that, my mobile data works. You can turn on a hotspot. Other people suggest using VPNs. That's not really that sustainable, and it doesn't work as well as you would like. However, for Chinese people, if they wanted to go outside of China, they can still use WeChat. They can still use Alipay. They can use their apps because there is no firewall preventing Chinese applications mostly from working. Although it doesn't work 100% of the time. For example, the Didi app you would use in, say, New Zealand or Australia doesn't necessarily work inside of China. And I can't actually download some of the Chinese apps that I would like to, like the AI apps, to make things a little bit more convenient here.
Because I'm using that international SIM, I have to use my Apple account, and Apple restricts what I can download on the App Store.
So there is that big difference between the firewall. It's not one size fits all, but you get the idea. The big benefit of the firewall for China is it protects itself from having outsider influence. For example, in the United States, they have misinformation, outrage. People just can post anything online. It's not censored. Whereas inside China, there's a lot more censorship, and because of that, there's more control over what's said, and there's not as much activism, or let's just say mental health issues that go along with all of the confusion that's going on. And so because of that, it kind of is a good thing for the health here in China. Let's talk about health. So I kind of touched on the health of people, that's mental health or physical health. I would say, generally speaking, people in China do appear to be more healthy. I feel as though people live to be older, okay? You'll see a lot more old people, and not just old people existing, but out in the general population, 80 years old or older. And they'll be out actively walking around and just a part of the society, riding, metro systems, riding trains, without anyone really around. In the US, you don't really see old people doing that. And because of that, it makes you wonder what's going on. But also the young people. I feel like the young people are more mentally stable in China. There's not as much activism or confusion like I talked about, because all of that has people really worked up. A lot of people are anxious, depressed in the West. I'm sure they have that in China. I know they have some issues with that, but it's not because of what's being said online or social media that has them all worked up. And then as far as the food goes, I would have to say that the food quality in mainland China is just better. You won't see as much obesity. You won't see as many people dealing with other health issues, because I feel like the food is healthier. In fact, I felt like I was losing weight in China. The only thing that was kind of putting weight on was the food was so good. I was eating too much of it. And so, but if I was to just eat the same amount of portions or the same amount of food, I feel like in China the food is just healthier. I don't know why that is. Maybe it could be the ingredients or less chemicals in the foods. Now let's talk about the USA and China as a civilization, as a country, as a society. So China is a very old civilization dating all the way back 5,000 years. I mean, you can see different capitals of China all over the place, whether it's in Xi'an, even Chongqing, Beijing. They've had many different capitals, okay? U.S. is about 250 years old. Now, the thing that you have to take into consideration about the U.S., if you go to Washington, D.C., you're going to see Roman architecture, Greek architecture. So yes, even though the city and the government, the Constitution was set up 250 years ago, the civilization still has tenets of things from, say, the Magna Carta or Socrates, whereas in China, it's more about Confucianism as far as a political or a philosophical structure, but then spiritually they're more Buddhist. In the US, it's kind of a mix. You have Christians, as I would say the majority, but then you also have plenty of atheists and agnostics. You also have mixed religions, so you'll see more diversity in terms of spiritual in the U.S. But as far as politically, I would say the U.S. is more like along the lines of, say, British, Greek, kind of like Machiavellian style political governance system. So generally speaking, I would say American society gives more independence to its citizens, whereas Chinese society focuses more on the group as a whole. So the greater good versus the independent, private property owner, business owner owning it outright. Things in China seem to be more controlled by what the government says you can and cannot do.
But also don't get the wrong idea. People own their own cars. They also own their own houses. They own their own businesses as well. And people in China have a lot more individual freedom than what most people outside think.
And now let's talk about censorship. So censorship is a big subject that a lot of people like to talk about. So the censorship in China, yeah, you kind of do have to watch what you say. You can't just say whatever you want and think it's okay, because they don't want activism or big protests breaking out and civil unrest. Whereas in the U.S., I think the U.S. suffers from having freedom of speech in some ways, because people get out of control with it. There's supposed to be laws protecting people against libel and stuff, but people still go out and say all types of different things, and then they end up in the law system. But I would say that free speech is good, and I do enjoy the free speech, but I think that it goes out of bounds. I think with any one of those situations, too much censorship is no good, and too much free speech is no good, because we've seen the downside of both of those situations occur. Now let's talk about money and payments, because this is something you need to survive every day. You're going to be using some form of currency exchange, right? Paying for something, whether it be dollars in the US, renminbi, or Chinese yuan, cash, which is very rare to use in China. So let's talk about that. In China, you're mostly going to use WeChat Pay or Alipay. They have Union Pay as well, but most time I was using Alipay. That's QR codes, so no real credit cards. Occasionally, about 10% of the time, I would use a debit card or a credit card, but almost always it was Alipay. You could also use WeChat Pay. It's just Alipay is more foreigner friendly. They also have a translate option inside of the app, whereas in the US, you still use debit cards, credit cards, American Express, Visa, Chase Sapphire, debit cards.
Also Apple Pay or Google Pay.
You don't really have QR codes that you would use, right? So that's a big difference. I mean, I would say China's mostly cashless. US, you could still use cash, although it seems like we're using less and less cash in the United States these days. But that's a big difference. For me, when I first got to China, I would say it took me about 3 days to really get a hang of how to do it, because you have to sync up a debit card, and sometimes it declines your sync up. You have to try again with a different card. So it takes about 2 to 3 days.
Now let's talk about salary and the cost of living in the USA and China. So in the United States, typically the average salary after taxes is around $4,200 to $4,300. That comes out to an average of $60,000 US. In China, for example, the average monthly salary is around $1,000 to $1,100 US. So in the US, people make about 4 times more the amount of money, because the average salary in China is about $9,000 to $17,000. It just depends on the city and the location, but yeah, that's the main takeaway. In the USA, a 1-bedroom apartment, say, would go for around $1,600 to $1,700 US. In China, it's about $400 to $600. Eating out, the average meal in the US is about $20 US. In China, it's about $3 to $5.
Let's talk about the environment and the natural beauty. So both are very big countries, very big in terms of size and population. China has about 1.4 billion people. US has about 350 million. Now, both countries have a very diverse environment. For example, China has a lot of deserts in the west. US has a deserts in the west. There's also high mountains in China. Down by Tibet, they call it the roof of the world. In the US, you have places like the Rocky Mountains. You also have Alaska. So you have both places having high elevation. Rockies are more pines, whereas in the south, where Tibet is, or Nepal, the Himalayas, that area is more, it's a different climate. It is alpine, but it's not going to be the same kind of thing you would have in, say, the Rockies. The deserts, I would say the deserts in China are more just dry and arid and bigger. Like the Gobi Desert is much bigger than, say, the Sonoran Desert or something like that. As far as the coastlines go, I would say the U.S., in particular Florida, California, those are hard to beat. Hawaii, those are very hard environments to beat as far as the beaches go. So I would say U.S. has probably better beaches, even though U.S. isn't really known for amazing beaches. Another thing that really stood out is, I would say, in the U.S., I see way more blue skies. Pretty much every city I go in the U.S., whether it's Los Angeles, Phoenix, Seattle, I'll see blue skies. I mean, obviously in China, most places I went, I didn't see much blue skies, even today. This is like the closest you'll get to a blue sky, and this is rare. So with that being said, I think the air quality in the U.S. is maybe a bit better, but there's some things that I want you to know about how that's shaping up, because I feel like China is getting more and more green and clean, something that I want to talk about. So with that being said, let's talk about the transportation. So in Shenzhen or many of these cities in China, people drive electric scooters, electric cars. They have way more electric vehicles on the road than in the U.S. U.S. still is heavily dependent on petrol or fossil fuels, whatever you want to call that. As with most of the world, China is probably one of the first countries I've been to where I've seen so much electric vehicles, electric bikes, electric cars. It's quite amazing. Also, the trains, you know, those are way better than the U.S. I mean, they have bullet trains, just the standard of train riding, the network, the accessibility of the train network is far ahead of something like, say, Amtrak, which is way behind. The airports are pretty comparable. I wouldn't say there's a big difference. I mean, a lot of the airports in the U.S. are modernizing and have been modernizing, JFK, LAX, and then a lot of the airports in China have been modernizing. You know, you have Beijing, Shanghai, Pudong, you have Shenzhen, you have a lot of those big cities modernizing their airports. Buses, I would say, are about the same, but no, I would say China probably has better buses as well. Just because when I think buses, I think Greyhound, and Greyhound is probably the worst in the world, or up there. One thing the U.S. does have is private vehicle ownership, very high rates of private ownership of automobiles. I think that's going up in China quite significantly, very quickly. But the U.S. still does have a very impressive and extensive highway system, which was built, I think, in the 60s and the 70s. And that one's hard to beat, even still to this day, even though it's getting older. That highway system is incredible. China is building out its highway system, but alongside the highway system that they're building, the Belt and Road Initiative, but also they're building the high-speed rail and the trains. And that's something that's where they're kind of taking the lead, is with the Belt and Road, the Silk Road, the New Age Silk Road. I don't really see how the United States were to catch up or keep up with China as the Silk Road, the Belt and Road Initiative continues to develop. I feel like over time, China is eventually going to have a better transportation network and system. The United States would have to make a conscious effort to improve its own transportation network. Well, now let's talk about safety. So this is a big one. China's a lot more safe than the United States to walk around. I mean, you can pretty much go anywhere in China without feeling a threat of being assaulted or attacked. It may happen very rarely, but in the U.S., you guys see the videos, you see them online, you see them on the news. Murder rate is way higher. I think I looked it up online. I think the likelihood of being attacked or murdered in China is like 0.05%, whereas in the United States, in some of the cities, it's like 0.3%, 0.6% in some of them. So it was like 6 times more dangerous in the United States than China. As far as like petty theft goes, you know, I don't really think the United States has much pickpocketing or petty theft so much. They do have like burglary and theft in the sense that people will, you know, break into your car and steal something. You don't really have that here in China. But you do kind of have like tea house scams and those little scams that kind of pop up in Shanghai. You know, they call it getting shanghaied. It's something that used to happen, but China's just gotten so much more safe over the years. And they do have cameras everywhere you look. You know, there's so many different cameras pretty much in this park. Wherever I'm at, it's going to have a lot. I mean, the U.S. has a lot of cameras in places as well, but China goes to the next level as far as like mass surveillance. I don't know if that's what keeps people honest or if it's just the general collective of China. The population is getting more and more money, so more and more financial security, less reason to be a thief or less reason to commit crimes. Where in the U.S., even though they do have a big social welfare network, with things like Section 8 or food stamps, stuff like that. For whatever reason, in the US, they have much higher crime than probably most developed countries in the world. And I would say a lot of that has to do with mental health, which some of it comes from illicit activities like drugs coming over the border from Mexico. But also, I think social media and the news, the Western media, drives up people's insanity over time, making people anxious, which causes them to turn to drugs. So that's a huge factor that's not necessarily happening in China that more people should pay attention to. I would say the social media craze, the frenzy, the way that the Western media treats its people, drives people crazy, puts them on edge, is a big problem. Another thing that I would notice about the civilization of China versus the United States, I would say they look out for each other a lot more. There's a lot more unity. I would say they do think about the group a lot more because of that awareness on the collective. I mean, even as a foreigner myself, people will do things in terms of customer service or care that you would never think someone would do for you in the United States. I mean, I feel like they just go the extra mile for care, for taking care of someone. They really like to take care of people, and I feel like in the US they just don't do that. Let's talk about the way that the people in China treat foreigners versus the way the people in the United States treat foreigners. I would say people in China are just more friendly to foreigners. They might think things or hear things, but they don't necessarily manifest hate because of it. I would say that in the US, there's friendly people, and Americans have been known to be friendly people, and they will treat foreigners nicely. But I would say as a collective, because of social media and because of Western media and what they see on, say, CNN or Fox News, it makes people have more entrenched biases, which make them more hateful, more angry. And so I would say that the way that Chinese treat me as a foreigner, even as an American, when they find out, is quite friendly. I don't feel as though I've experienced much racism at all here, whereas I would be concerned that if a Chinese person went to the United States, the likelihood that they would experience more racism or hatred from someone would probably be higher. As far as the cities go, like I've been to many of the mega cities, they call them tier 1 cities in China, Shenzhen, which is where I'm at now, or Guangzhou, Beijing, Shanghai. Those cities, they're huge, okay? And like Chongqing, for example, I compare that to Pittsburgh, but imagine Pittsburgh with 15 times more people. So that city's got like 15 to 20 million people. Pittsburgh has like 1.3 to 2 million people maybe in the whole metro area. So I would just say the cities, because they're bigger, they also have more emphasis on community gatherings and stuff like that. Less emphasis on cars. More people are out walking in pretty much every city. Everywhere you go in China, people are out walking. You don't see that as much in the US. I mean, sure, in New York City you get large pedestrian traffic, but cities like Phoenix or even Los Angeles, most of the time people are inside their cars going in parking lots and then parking. You don't see as many parking lots in China as you see in the US because people use a lot of mass transportation, whether it be the metro or trains. Even though they're getting more and more cars using the roads, I would just say that that's something that stands out. There's more walking in China, more of an active lifestyle because of that in big cities. And we did touch on the safety. I would say the big cities in China are far more safe than the big cities in the US. It's not even close. It's not even comparable. Anyone who says otherwise is full of it. It's just way more safe, a lot less homeless, a lot less drug addiction, people on the streets. So that's what it is. A lot of the cities in China, in particular the new ones, Shenzhen, Shanghai, even Beijing, they have like underground cities. So on the top they'll have a city, but down below you'll realize right below the road is a whole nother city. It's like a mega mall. It's huge, it's extensive, and they're everywhere. Also with the metro system, everything is a QR code on your phone. So inside Alipay, you'll have like the Shenzhen transit card. All you're doing is scanning a QR code, whereas in the US, you're still scanning metro cards or tickets. Sometimes you'll lose them. You have to fumble around in your wallet to see if you got it. Well, here, all you have to do is just use your phone and the QR code that's inside Alipay. Something I want to say about social media a bit more is Douyin, which is also the company that created TikTok. That's just the name of Chinese TikTok. There they teach more educational or happy kind of stuff with their algorithms, whereas in the US it seems like that algorithm is more driven off of outrage and virality and just controversy. So that's a big difference right there. Also in China, I would say the government controls what the social media and what the propaganda or what the information is that's getting out, whereas in the West it's controlled by the corporations like Facebook, Meta, or maybe Google, they do things like shadow ban, or they control things through the corporate level instead of the government level. So I would say America is more of a corporate kind of controlled country, even though they have the government. But in China, it's definitely absolutely the government that controls everything.
And if you enjoyed this one, you can also watch another podcast about my 30 days in China. Click here.